Startling message found in Jerry Lewis's will. Family is dumbfounded. Jerry Lewis, the uncontested king of comedy, made millions laugh. Lewis's private life was not funny. It all culminated after the star's death in 2017. According to his will, Lewis caused difficulty even after his death. Fans were unaware of this surprise. After decades of entertainment, Lewis was still hilarious to them and us. However, the actor and comic were aging. He was clearly dying. Lewis died of heart failure in August 2017 after years of cardiac difficulties. He died at age 91. Lewis's wife, Sandy Pitnick, and adoptive daughter, Danielle, were allegedly with him when he died in Nevada. In the weeks following Lewis's death, all his personal secrets came out. His will became public. That court paperwork revealed what the comic star thought of his 6 other adult children, and it wasn't good. Lewis had a dark side that only his family knew about. It seemed so. As he rose in Hollywood, the celebrity concealed this side of himself. After growing up in a creative family, Joseph Levitch, Lewis, hit Hollywood. Lewis had a dark side that only his family knew, seemed so. The Hollywood star hid this. Lewis, born into a creative family, went to Hollywood. Lewis, in particular, started to have thoughts of self-doubt. That prompted him to seek attention from others, which explains why he subsequently sought the spotlight. But even before he began to leave audiences in stitches, the young Lewis had another goal in mind. Lewis was yearning for his parents to take with them when they traveled for business. While he waited for a response, he began putting together his own concerts at school. And in the end, the New Jersey native got what he wanted. Yes, when Lewis's father was given a long-term position at a New Jersey hotel, he opted to bring his kid with him. But Lewis wasn't about to let his father get all the attention. At the hotel, he formed his own comedy combo with the owner's daughter. They mouthed the words to well-known songs together. That taste of fame? Lewis couldn't let the opportunity pass him by. He dropped out of high school and attempted to get into the entertainment industry. But first, there was the little matter of his name. Joseph Levitch was never meant to be spelled out in lights on the front of movie theaters. Jerry Lewis would have been a much better match. Lewis went on to meet Dean Martin under his new pseudonym. The singer, who seemed confident, beautiful, and, well, just plain cool, stunned the wannabe comic. Fortunately, Martin was also smitten with Lewis. Despite their opposing onstage personas, the couple went on to have an extremely successful relationship that lasted far into the 1950s. Lewis and Martin's distinctive combination of music and humor won over nightclub crowds. But destiny was waiting in the wings when the Odd Team performed their performance at the Copacabana Club in 1948. Hal Wallace, a Hollywood producer who was in the audience that night, found what he saw to be quite moving. Wallace, at the very least, signed Lewis and Martin to Paramount Pictures. They were both destined to be Hollywood stars, no doubt about it. The couple made their debut in the 1949 comedy My Friend Irma and went on to star in a slew of comedies over the next 7 years. Their last collaboration was on Hollywood or Bust in 1956. Of course, Lewis didn't fade away after his divorce from Martin. He proceeded to establish himself in Hollywood, appearing in a slew of comedic films that solidified his reputation as one to watch. But Lewis was more than a one-trick pony, as he demonstrated by stepping behind the scenes. Lewis not only played the starring role of Stanley in 1960's The Bellboy, but he also directed the film. It was the first of many films in which the comedian did double duty, and that strategy ultimately paid off in 1963. The Nutty Professor was released in cinemas throughout America that year. Similarly to The Bellboy, Lewis directed and performed in the comedic classic, demonstrating his abilities as a filmmaker. Fortunately for Lewis, the film was a success. The Nutty Professor grossed $19 million at the box office, almost double its initial budget. Lewis might expect a lot more employment in Hollywood as a result of his achievements, and he made the most out of it, releasing a film every year until 1972. He also presented his legendary telethons for muscular dystrophy beginning in 1966. He was certainly occupied. It's no surprise, however, that he elected to take a hiatus in the early 1970s. Lewis diversified again after re-entering the spotlight in the 1980s, And fittingly, he did it with Martin Scorsese's The King of Comedy. Despite the fact that Lewis portrayed a comic in that film, he was effectively the straight man to Robert De Niro's Rupert Pupkin. Could Lewis step away from the wisecracks for a while and allow someone else to be funny? Well, The King of Comedy demonstrated that he could, and he received a lot of accolades for his performance, including a BAFTA nomination. But although his profession was on the rise, his personal life was, shall we say, in an intriguing state. Lewis, like many other Hollywood stars, had received plenty of female attention. But there had been a few remarkable women in his life. He'd been introduced to a lady named Patty Palmer before ever joining up with Martin, and only a few months after their initial meeting, the couple decided to marry in 1944. In July 1945, Lewis and Palmer had their first child, Gary. Ronald, his second son, was born 4 years later. For a while, the family unit remained together as the actor established himself on the big screen. But Lewis and Palmer weren't finished yet. They had 4 additional sons as the comic progressed through the ranks of Hollywood. But when Palmer gave up her bright singing career to care for her boys, Lewis rewarded her by seeing other women behind her back. Lewis, as he readily admitted to the press, was a cheat. That's one of the reasons his marriage to Palmer failed. Even after the couple split in 1983, Lewis attempted monogamy once again. He would also marry again. Sandy Pitnick, a Las Vegas dancer, married Lewis in 1983. Despite the fact that Lewis already had 6 boys, he wanted to establish a new family. In 1992, he and Pitnick welcomed a new member to their family, adoptive daughter Danielle. As previously stated, Danielle was apparently by Lewis's bedside when he died. That dedication? It was returned to her following the discovery of her father's will. His other children, on the other hand, must have been taken aback when they discovered the terms of the legal instrument. Lewis, you see, had cut his boys off totally in what looked to be a spectacular act of malice. According to the will, I have intentionally excluded Gary Lewis, Ronald Lewis, Anthony Joseph Lewis, Christopher Joseph Lewis, Scott Anthony Lewis, and Joseph Christopher Lewis, and their descendants as beneficiaries of my estate, it being my intention that they shall receive no benefits hereunder. Ouch! Pitnick and Danielle were the only beneficiaries of Lewis's $50 million fortune. But you're undoubtedly asking why the comedian selected this method of vengeance. While there doesn't seem to be a single cause for the rejection, there are a few possibilities. Anthony and his siblings had a strained connection with their father, according to Anthony. Yes, when the comedian's second youngest kid spoke with Inside Edition in late 2017, he presented an unsettling image of what Lewis had been like behind closed doors. It wasn't an Ozzie and Harriet life, Anthony asserted. When my father arrived and parked directly in front of the large front door, my mother would go on the intercom and announce, "Your father's home," and my brothers and I dispersed. On any given day, we could never anticipate his conduct. Lewis's kid also said that his father had beaten him with a belt twice, but in his opinion, it wasn't the worst part. During his Inside Edition interview, Anthony said, "The emotional abuse I suffered was every day." Then, when the movie star died, just 2 of his sons were invited to the burial. That alone indicated how strained Lewis's relationship with his children had become. However, Christopher and Scott's participation at the ceremony had no effect at the conclusion of the will. And we've already seen glimpses of Lewis's conduct. In 1989, Joseph told the National Enquirer, "Living with my father was pure hell. I've experimented with drugs, I've tried counseling, but the reality continues to sting. My father doesn't care about me." That had to be terrifying. Unfortunately, Joseph died of a heroin overdose in 2009, leaving behind 3 children. He hadn't spoken to his father in 20 years before his death. His own boys had also never met their grandpa. Sadly, it wasn't the end of it. Surprisingly, Lewis also declined to support Joseph's burial expenses, despite the fact that he could easily afford them. And as if that wasn't enough, rumors circulated that the comic legend didn't want the tale to be made public. He allegedly urged his other children to keep the knowledge to themselves, maybe to avoid a reaction. Then, a year after Joseph's death, Gary Lewis agreed to speak with the National Enquirer. And like his younger brother, he had some harsh words for his father. Worse, he seemed to suggest that the comic was partially to blame for Joseph's death. "Jerry Lewis is a mean and evil person," Gary said. He was never nice or compassionate to my brothers or myself. Although I am not certain that drugs contributed to Joe's passing, I believe it might have been possible to prevent it if he and my father had a better relationship. I suppose he died as a result of a broken heart. My father seems unconcerned. What did Lewis think of these allegations? So in 2014, when speaking to The Hollywood Reporter, he finally spoke out about his family. Throughout the emotional conversation, the father of 7 looked to be heartbroken by all that had happened. He said, for example, that Joseph's death had deeply affected him. To this day, I don't understand Joseph's death because it's unfair, Lewis said. It's not unjust to me, but it is to Joseph. The fact that he followed that route made the injustice dumb. But he was my kid, and he's no longer with us, and there's nothing I can do about it. 1,000 times I beat myself. Sam will come to me and say, "Are we beating ourselves again?" Lewis said, "A tiny bit. You have nothing to do with it." She'll say, "You released Joseph into the world when he was 25. You submitted what you believed to be an ideal human being. The ultimate outcome revealed what he accomplished with his time away from you. But I'll tell you something, you never get over it." But maybe Anthony should have the last say. "I knew I wasn't going to get anything in the will," he told Inside Edition, "but the true thorn in my side, the actual dagger in my heart, are the grandkids who were left out. I'm sad I didn't get any one-on-one time with my father to tell him how much I love him." However, Lewis was hardly the first Hollywood celebrity to draft a contentious will. Burt Reynolds died in September 2018 after a long and successful career. He had millions in the bank, and that money seemed to be going to his loved ones. When the terms of Reynolds' will were released, there was a surprise omission. Surprisingly, the star seemed to have left no money for his only son.